Imagine dedicating your life to a dream, only to watch it crumble before your eyes. Sounds like a nightmare, doesn't it? But what if I told you that these failures, those moments when everything seems lost, could be your greatest teachers? Today, we'll meet Santiago, a young man who turned his biggest failures into lessons that led him to success. But here's the secret. What you're about to hear isn't just Santiago's story. It's also a reflection of your own journey. Have you ever felt like, no matter how hard you try, the world keeps knocking you down? That your ideas, no matter how brilliant, just don't work out? Maybe you've been asking yourself, why is this happening to me? Well, here's the truth no one likes to admit. Failure is essential. And no, that's not something you hear every day. It's a counterintuitive belief, but one that can completely change your perspective. In this story, you'll discover how every mistake, every obstacle, and even the most bitter betrayals can be catalysts for growth. We'll explore the 7 moments Santiago failed and how he turned each of them into a stepping stone to something greater. This isn't about magic, it's about a set of choices you can make too. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll not only understand why failure is part of the process, but also learn how to transform your own challenges into opportunities. So, are you ready to change how you see failure? Let's begin. Santiago was the kind of person who saw the world in more vibrant colors than most. At 28, he carried the spark of a dreamer within him, a flame lit by his grandfather Mateo, a retired accountant who always spoke of the importance of pursuing what makes your heart race. Inspired by his grandfather's stories of perseverance, Santiago decided to open his own cafe in Córdoba, Spain. He believed his passion for artisanal coffee would be enough to turn the place into an instant success. But as he would soon learn, reality isn't always as sweet as the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. In the beginning, Santiago had plenty of confidence but lacked the plan to sustain his dream. He chose a small space in the heart of the city, decorated with rustic personal touches that reflected his artistic vision. His friend Lucia, a talented local artist, helped with murals on the walls, making the space cozy and unique. However, when the doors opened, excitement gave way to unease. Few customers came, and the lack of financial planning began to weigh heavily. The initial sparkle quickly faded under the shadow of mounting losses. The days that followed brought challenges Santiago was not prepared to face. Each morning, he waited anxiously for a line of customers that never formed. Bills piled up in a menacing stack on the counter. The shame of admitting failure grew alongside the debts, making it even harder to ask for help. Even so, Mateo, ever present, watched his grandson patiently, firmly believing that difficulties would become invaluable lessons. Then came a moment, 3 months after the grand opening, when everything seemed to fall apart. The cafe was on the brink of closure, and Santiago felt lost, as if he had not only betrayed his dream, but also his grandfather's trust. That was when Mateo stepped in. With calm reassurance, he reminded Santiago that failures are not endings, but disguised beginnings. These words, spoken with the conviction of someone who had lived long enough to understand the value of persistence, marked the start of a new perspective for Santiago. With Mateo's words echoing in his mind, Santiago began to see his situation in a new light. The initial failure no longer felt like an enemy, but a strict teacher, showing him what he needed to learn. He started noticing the details he had previously ignored. The streets around the cafe were quiet during the day, lacking the pedestrian traffic he had imagined. His selection of coffees, though authentic, didn't resonate with the local crowd, who preferred simpler, more accessible options. It was painful to admit, but Santiago realized that passion alone wasn't enough. Even so, he wasn't alone. Lucia, his loyal friend, insisted on offering her support, despite Santiago's stubbornness to shoulder the burden alone. "If you love this, Santiago, don't give up just yet. Just change your approach," she said while painting a new mural in the cafe, trying to draw more attention. It was an attempt to reignite the flame of Santiago's dream, which, though dimmed, still flickered somewhere within him. Over time, he realized he needed to open himself to help, a step that required as much courage as starting the business in the first place. Santiago began seeking advice from others, something he once saw as a sign of weakness. Mateo became his closest confidant, offering not just moral support, but also practical insights about finances and management. "There's always something to learn," Mateo would say. He encouraged Santiago to step out of the bubble of his idealistic ideas and confront the numbers honestly. This shift in mindset marked the first real sign of growth for Santiago. He was learning to adapt, a skill that would become fundamental on his journey. Meanwhile, nights became moments of reflection. Santiago would sit at one of the cafe's tables, listening to the sound of the clock and the echo of his thoughts. He reviewed what had gone wrong, jotting down every detail like a learning journal. It was during those solitary nights that he realized something important. Failure didn't define him. He had a choice to make: use the mistakes as fuel to start over, or let them bury him. And as Mateo always said, what matters is not what happens to you, but how you respond. The next morning, something shifted. Santiago woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, a feeling that despite the setbacks, his story was far from over. He started talking to the few customers who came in, trying to understand their preferences and what they were looking for in a cafe. Listening intently to every word, he realized he needed to connect his artistic vision to what his customers truly wanted. It was a simple yet powerful lesson. It wasn't just about what he loved, but what he could offer to others. That was when Mateo proposed an exercise that changed everything. "Imagine your cafe as a second home for everyone who walks in," he said calmly, while helping Santiago rearrange the space. Together they adjusted the furniture, redesigned the menu, and even created a small area for local meetings and events. Lucia, ever creative, suggested displaying works from local artists, turning the cafe into a community hub. Slowly, the space began to come alive again, though much work remained to be done. Even with small victories, Santiago knew the road ahead would be long. The debts were still there, and he needed to find a way to stabilize the finances. It was during this time that Mateo shared a story from his own youth when he almost lost everything in a poorly thought-out investment. "It was tough, but it taught me to think long-term and always prepare for the unexpected," he confessed. That honesty deeply moved Santiago. For the first time, he felt he wasn't alone in his failures. He was part of something larger, a shared human experience. Deep down, Santiago understood that the failure of the cafe was just the beginning of something greater. Each mistake was shaping him, testing his ability to learn, grow, and persist. He began to see his cafe not as a final destination, but as a stepping stone to discovering who he truly was. The shame he once felt gave way to a quiet determination, the kind of strength that comes when someone decides to face their failures head-on. There were still many battles to fight, and Santiago knew it. But for the first time, he felt ready for what lay ahead. After learning hard lessons and making initial changes, Santiago realized that to achieve something greater, he needed to invest in himself. He enrolled in a local entrepreneurship course, determined to better understand the business world. During the first class, he met Alejandra, a business consultant with a sharp, pragmatic outlook. As Santiago introduced himself, sharing his story with honesty, Alejandra looked at him with a mix of empathy and determination. "Your dream has potential," she said, But you need a strategy, not just passion. Alejandra became an indispensable mentor for Santiago. She challenged him to think beyond the walls of the cafe, suggesting that he explore the digital world to reach new customers. The idea was simple: offer artisanal coffee and unique experiences through online orders and social media. At first, Santiago hesitated. What he loved was human connection, the aroma of coffee filling the room. But the need for survival spoke louder, and he accepted the challenge, starting with small steps. With Alejandra's guidance, he created a social media profile, investing in high-quality photos and captivating stories about the origins of his coffee. The response was immediate. Messages began pouring in, inquiring about deliveries and events. For the first time, Santiago felt he was on the right track, and the cafe, which had once been empty, started coming back to life. The digital realm was new territory, but he was learning to navigate it, one coffee order at a time. However, not everything was good news. Santiago soon realized that his perfectionism was becoming a hurdle. He insisted on doing everything himself, from roasting coffee beans to posting on social media, fearing that no one else would understand his vision. This workload quickly took its toll. The accumulated tasks left him exhausted, and deadlines became increasingly difficult to meet. Alejandra tried to warn him. "Santiago, your vision is incredible, but you can't do it all alone. Learning to trust others is also part of success." Despite Alejandra's warnings, Santiago remained reluctant to delegate tasks. He believed that to maintain the essence of his brand, he had to oversee every detail. But this obsessive control soon landed him in a complicated situation. A client placed a large order for a corporate event, and Santiago, eager to impress, accepted without hesitation. He spent nights working alone, trying to ensure everything was perfect. But when the deadline came, he realized he had underestimated the workload. The order was delayed, and criticism began surfacing on social media. The feeling of failure hit him hard. What had started as a dream seemed to be unraveling again, and this time he felt he had no excuses. "You're trying to carry the world on your shoulders," Alejandra said in a firm but compassionate tone upon seeing Santiago's state. "You need to decide whether you want to be a perfectionist working alone or a leader who inspires a team. That's the only way your business can grow." These words echoed in his mind, but the change wouldn't come easily. Yet Santiago knew he couldn't continue like this. He began looking for ways to delegate parts of the workload, starting with small steps. He hired an assistant to help with deliveries and asked Lucia to assist with social media posts. Initially, he felt uncomfortable handing over tasks he thought he could do better himself. But over time, he realized that others could contribute significantly to his vision. It was a relief to finally breathe again and focus on what he did best: creating. The transition wasn't without its hiccups. There were moments when deliveries didn't go as planned, or when he questioned whether he had made the right decision. But with Alejandra's support and his small team's dedication, Santiago began to see the benefits of sharing responsibilities. He was learning the art of trust, something that not only improved his business, but also brought a new level of balance to his life. Even so, the fear of losing control lingered, challenging him to keep growing. Over the following weeks, Santiago noticed something extraordinary. His team wasn't just completing tasks. They were bringing in fresh ideas that he would never have considered on his own. For instance, Lucia suggested creating short videos showcasing the process of preparing artisanal coffee, which generated significant engagement on social media. Meanwhile, the assistant proposed partnerships with local events, increasing the brand's visibility in the city. For the first time, Santiago realized that trusting others didn't mean losing control. It meant amplifying the impact of his vision. Still, The challenge of balancing quality and efficiency remained constant. One day, while reviewing a large order, Santiago had a revealing conversation with Alejandra. "Have you ever thought that your perfectionism might be limiting your business's potential?" she asked in her usual direct tone. Santiago hesitated, but he knew she was right. He needed to learn to differentiate between what truly required his attention and what could be delegated without compromising the business's purpose. This epiphany led him to implement a more structured system for running the cafe. With Alejandra's help, he created clear processes for every aspect of the business, from customer service to logistics. It was no longer just about him. It was about the team and the vision they shared. This step allowed Santiago to focus on what truly inspired him, creating unique experiences for his customers, both online and in person. However, the journey of learning wasn't over. During a conversation with Alejandra, Santiago shared his fear that delegating too much might distance him from his creative essence. "It's a delicate balance," she replied. "But remember, real growth comes when you learn to expand without losing the soul of what you've built." Those words resonated deeply, and Santiago realized he was in the middle of a transformation, not just as a business owner, but as a person. He was ready to face the next challenge with more wisdom and a supportive team by his side. Just when Santiago was beginning to feel like he was in control, life threw him one of its toughest tests. After months of hard work and small victories, he noticed discrepancies in the cafe's finances. Something didn't seem right. Upon digging deeper, he discovered that Diego, a longtime friend and business partner, had been embezzling money. The sense of betrayal was devastating. Diego, with whom he had not only shared the dream, but also important moments in his life, had chosen to prioritize his own interests. The discovery came during a surprise audit encouraged by Alejandra, who insisted on implementing more transparent practices. When the numbers didn't add up, Santiago confronted Diego. The dialogue was tense and emotional. "How could you do this? I trusted you," Santiago exclaimed, his voice oscillating between anger and heartbreak. Diego tried to justify his actions, claiming he needed the money, but to Santiago, the explanation felt hollow. Their friendship, once a source of support, crumbled before his eyes. The cafe, already grappling with so many challenges, seemed on the verge of collapse once again. Santiago felt like he was at the brink of giving up. He spent sleepless nights re-evaluating everything. The debts had grown larger than ever, and now he had to deal with both the financial and emotional impact of Diego's betrayal. The feeling of loneliness was suffocating. For the first time, he seriously considered closing the cafe and walking away from the dream that had consumed so much of his energy and hope. That's when Rosa stepped in. A veteran entrepreneur and friend of Alejandra, Rosa heard about the situation and reached out to Santiago. "Failures and betrayals are inevitable, but they don't define who you are," she said, with a serenity born from years of experience. Rosa saw potential in Santiago that he couldn't see in himself at that moment. With patience, she helped him organize the steps needed to address the crisis, showing him that even amidst chaos, there was room for rebuilding. Santiago hesitated before accepting Rosa's help. Part of him was still paralyzed by Diego's betrayal, and another part feared appearing weak by admitting he couldn't handle everything on his own. But Rosa had something he couldn't ignore, a combination of practical clarity and genuine empathy. She started with something simple but essential. "Let's organize your finances," she said firmly, placing a stack of papers on the table. It was a small gesture, but for Santiago, it felt like the first step on a staircase he desperately needed to climb. As they worked together, Rosa not only offered technical advice, but also helped Santiago process his emotions. Betrayals are painful, but they're lessons, she said, while helping him draft a plan to recover from Diego's damage. Rosa didn't downplay the severity of the situation, but she also wouldn't let Santiago wallow in it. "What matters now is what you do from here on out," she repeated, her words echoing like a mantra in Santiago's mind. With Rosa's support, Santiago decided to take action. He hired a lawyer to file a case against Diego and recover part of the stolen money. It was a difficult decision that came with nights of doubt and inner conflict. "This isn't just about the money," Rosa reminded him. "It's about protecting what you've built and ensuring this lesson is never repeated." Santiago knew it was the right choice, even though it hurt. It marked the beginning of a new chapter where he had to stand firm and mature as a leader. Slowly, the cafe began to stabilize again. The impact of Diego's betrayal didn't disappear, but Santiago discovered a new resilience within himself. He started making more informed decisions, learning from every mistake of the past. Rosa helped him reassess not just the business, but also his approach as a leader. "You're stronger now," she said one day, as they reviewed numbers that finally began to make sense. And for the first time in weeks, Santiago felt a real glimmer of hope. Over time, Santiago began to see Diego's betrayal as a turning point in his journey. Not that the pain had vanished, but it had transformed into fuel. Under Rosa's guidance, he decided to turn the crisis into an opportunity to restructure the business. He reviewed contracts, implemented stricter financial controls, and reorganized his team, making it clear that transparency would be the foundation moving forward. It was a tough process, but also a liberating one. For the first time, Santiago felt he was building something solid, something no one could take away from him. His relationship with Rosa also became an unexpected source of emotional strength. She was more than just a mentor. She was someone who understood the depth of his fears and insecurities. During one of their conversations, Rosa shared a moment from her own life when she almost lost her business due to a partner's mismanagement. "The difference is, I almost gave up," she said with a wistful smile. "But you're choosing to fight. That already puts you a step ahead." Those words stayed with Santiago, reinforcing his determination to keep going. As he rebuilt the cafe, Santiago began to notice something new in himself. A confidence that didn't come from avoiding failures, but from facing them head-on. He realized that every hard decision was preparing him for even greater challenges. The cafe, which had once been just a romantic dream, now felt like an extension of his own resilience. Every cup of coffee served, every satisfied customer, was a small victory against the shadow of betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him. However, Santiago knew the road ahead would still be full of obstacles. "I'm not going to fool myself into thinking this is the end of my problems," he confessed to Rosa during a break at the cafe. "But for the first time, I feel ready for what's next." Rosa nodded with a proud look in her eyes. "What matters is that you've learned to get back up. And believe me, that will take you much further than any perfect plan." With those words, Santiago felt prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Months later, Santiago found himself in a position he had never imagined, representing his cafe at a coffee festival in Barcelona. The event brought together coffee enthusiasts from around the world, giving him a platform to showcase his work. The sleepless nights, the mistakes, and the lessons had all led to this moment. His cafe, which had been on the brink of closing so many times, was now recognized as an example of high-quality artisanal coffee. But the festival wasn't just a celebration, it was also a new test of his resilience. As he set up his booth, Santiago felt the weight of expectations. Surrounded by renowned competitors, he wondered if he truly belonged in this space. Even so, the words of Rosa and Mateo echoed in his mind, encouraging him to move forward. "You're here because you deserve to be," he repeated to himself as he arranged the cups and coffee samples. The familiar smell of roasted coffee beans served as a comforting reminder of everything he had overcome. When the first visitors began to arrive, Santiago took a deep breath and decided to give it his all. The response exceeded his expectations. Visitors were drawn to the authenticity of his story and the exceptional quality of his products. Each tasting was accompanied by a brief conversation in which he shared the origins of the beans and the techniques behind their preparation. "This is more than coffee, it's a journey," he would say with a smile, and he wasn't exaggerating. Every cup reflected his persistence and the support of the team that had helped him get there. Among the visitors, one group caught his attention, investors interested in expanding emerging brands. They praised his work but also presented a proposal that left him torn. "We want to take your brand to the next level," they said, promising rapid growth and financial backing. However, there was a catch. Santiago would have to relinquish part of his creative control. It was a tempting offer, but one fraught with implications. What had seemed like a pinnacle moment at the festival now became a critical dilemma for his future. As the investors detailed their proposals, Santiago felt his mind flood with doubts. Their words were enticing: rapid expansion, greater reach, global recognition. But at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that something precious might be lost in the process. The artisanal essence that defined his cafe risked being diluted by strategies focused solely on profit. He thought back to the sleepless nights, the painful mistakes, and the moments when his passion had kept him grounded. What if all of this loses its meaning, he wondered. During a break at the festival, Santiago found a quiet moment to reflect with Mateo. His grandfather, watching proudly from the sidelines, seemed to sense his internal turmoil. "Do you know what makes your cafe special?" Mateo asked, his voice calm. "It's not just the beans or the techniques, it's the heart you pour into every cup." The words resonated deeply with Santiago. Mateo wasn't telling him to reject the offer, but to remember who he was and what he wanted to build. That night, back in his hotel room, Santiago reviewed every detail of the proposals. He took notes, compared figures, and weighed the risks. But deep down, he knew the decision wouldn't be purely logical, it would be emotional. What was at stake wasn't just the financial future of the cafe, but also his identity as a creator. Alejandra had always taught him the importance of thinking strategically, while Rosa had reminded him to trust his instincts. Now he needed to balance both. The next day, when the investors returned to his booth, Santiago was ready. He thanked them for their proposal and presented a counteroffer of his own. "I want to grow," he said firmly, "but only if we can preserve the essence of the brand." He suggested clauses that would guarantee the authenticity of his products and maintain his creative control. The investors seemed surprised, but also impressed by his stance. It was a risk, but Santiago knew it was the only path he could take without compromising what he had built. The investors' response was a mix of interest and caution. They agreed to most of Santiago's terms, but imposed a clear condition: growth would be slower than initially planned. This meant Santiago would need to continue balancing the cafe's expansion with the challenges of day-to-day operations. However, Santiago didn't hesitate. "I'd rather grow with consistency than lose what makes us unique," he stated with a confidence that even surprised himself. He knew he was taking a risk, but it was one he could live with. The festival became a milestone, not just professionally, but also personally for Santiago. Seeing his cafe recognized among so many renowned brands brought him a sense of validation he had never felt before. At the event's closing, as he packed up his equipment and leftover samples, he reflected on the journey that had brought him there. Every mistake, every loss, every moment of doubt had contributed to his growth. He was no longer the idealistic young man who believed passion was enough. He had learned to combine dreams with strategy, heart with reason. Matteo, who had been watching from a distance, approached and placed a hand on his grandson's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Santiago, but remember, this is only the beginning." Santiago chuckled, realizing how much there was still to accomplish. Rosa and Alejandra were also there, their presence a reminder that he hadn't reached this point alone. The festival was a symbol of victory, but also of responsibility. Santiago now understood that there was more at stake than his own dream. He was building something that impacted his community and his team. As he left the festival, Santiago felt different. It wasn't just the entrepreneur in him that was gaining recognition, but the human being who had learned to embrace challenges with courage and resilience. He was eager to return to his cafe and begin this new chapter with the same passion that had guided him from the start, but now with a clearer vision and a stronger foundation. There was still so much to do, and Santiago was ready to face every step with determination and gratitude. Santiago was no longer the same young dreamer who opened his first cafe, believing that passion alone would conquer the world. He had stumbled, fallen, and, most importantly, learned from every challenge along the way. From the timid opening and the planning mistakes to the painful betrayal of a friend and the moment he had to choose between rapid growth and staying true to his values, every experience had shaped him. He had become more resilient, more strategic, and above all, more connected to who he truly was. Santiago's journey teaches us that failure is not the end. It's a demanding but indispensable teacher. The mistakes he made didn't define him. What defined him was how he chose to respond to each obstacle. With the help of mentors like Matteo, Rosa, and Alejandra, he discovered that true success doesn't lie in the absence of failure, but in the courage to face it and transform it into growth. His cafe was no longer just a business. It had become a reflection of his determination, his growth, and his passion for creating something meaningful. And now I ask you, what challenges are holding you back? What would you do if you knew that failure isn't the end, but the stepping stone to something greater? Perhaps the next step in your journey is to face those challenges head-on, just as Santiago did. Allow yourself to grow, to learn, and to begin again, because it's in the process that you'll find the strength to achieve your dreams. If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning from stories that showcase the power of personal growth and resilience. Let's transform obstacles into opportunities and failures into new beginnings. After all, as we always say, in silence we learn, in wisdom we grow. In Sat